Are you a spy? Do you work for MI6 or the CIA?
I, I'm not, but
How do we
I
know
guess
you're telling the
the
truth?
accusation.
Hi, Elliot. First of all, for our listeners right around the world, how would you describe yourself? How would you describe Bellingcat?
So I'm really a self-taught investigator. I'm someone who founded an organization to teach other people how to do that. And that organization was Bellingcat, which does something called open source investigation. And that's really using publicly available information coming from a range of different topics to investigate things that are happening many hundreds or even thousands of miles away.
I remember attending one of your first presentations 10 years ago, I think, almost to the date, at The Guardian, where you talked about MH17, the Malaysian Airlines plane shot down over Ukraine. And I came into that presentation thinking, what can that man from Leicester tell me about what's going on in Ukraine?
Leicester, by the way, for listeners around the world, is a very lovely medium-sized city, sort of in the middle of the UK.
Oh, I'm sure. And I emerged from that presentation a completely transformed man. You completely changed my mind. How do you do that?
So really, since the advent of the iPhone and the spread of smartphone technology and the spread of apps on those smartphones, people are continually online, and they're not just consuming information, but they're creating information. And that's not just social media posts, but it's photographs, videos that they're sharing online. And in terms of things like conflict zones, for example, that's where there's a lot of interesting information that people are just kind of gathering through those devices. So what we're doing in part is looking for that information and then analyzing it, trying to figure out, is this filmed the way it claims to be filmed? And there's various things you can do to do that. We have one process we call geolocation, which is taking a video or photograph and then using publicly available information such as satellite imagery, reference photographs, Google Street View, stuff available to anyone to confirm that location. And if you do an awful lot of that around various topics, you can glean a huge amount of information.
Let's now go through some of the more recent examples of what you do. Back in July, a hospital in Kiev called Ohmad-Did, which is Ukraine's biggest hospital for children, it was hit. Eliot, can you tell us what you did about Ahmadid, what you found out?
So the first thing we always do is try and gather as much information about the incident as possible. And key to that is visual evidence, because you can have witness statements, you can have claims and counterclaims, but what's really important is having that visual evidence to actually, see what happened. We gathered that, we located it where it was in relation to the hospital, so we knew which way the cameras were pointing, and some of those captured explosions, some captured the aftermath, but one of them actually captured the missile in the air as it was flying into the building. We took frames of that video, and it allowed us to get a silhouette, a shape of the weapon in question. And then, Russia only has so many different types of missiles it fires into Ukraine. So we compared it against various types of missiles. We created 3D models of those missiles to overlay with the image. And it showed very clearly that it was a specific type of Russian missile that was fired at the hospital. And it wasn't that there were claims and counterclaims. One of the counterclaims was this was a Ukrainian air defense missile, but so we could say, no, that's not the case because it doesn't fit with those kind of missiles. It's the shape of this specific Russian missile.
I know you will have been asked this many times, and we have to, for the benefit of our listeners. Are you a spy? Do you work for MI6 or the CIA?
I'm not, but
how do we know you're telling the truth?
Well, the thing we do at Bellingcat is we try to be as transparent about how we're funded, how we work. All our sources are transparent. So we try to be as transparent as possible. Unfortunately, in Russia, we've been declared an undesirable organization and a foreign agent. So there are risks associated with being transparent at the moment. So we're not going to put our home addresses online or anything like that. But
right. Sorry, just to explain, what's the significance of being described as a foreign agent? What does that mean for you and your safety and your colleagues' safety?
Well, in terms of Russia, any Russian site that cites us now can get into legal trouble. Anyone who partners with us or works with us inside Russia or outside of Russia can basically be prosecuted by the Russian state at the moment. Right. most people just ignore it because Russia doesn't really have much legal reach outside of Russia. So it doesn't affect us in many ways, but it does mean that, we get a lot of funders who are donating to us, who are very concerned that their operations that might, touch on Russia in terms of supporting NGOs there could be affected because Bellingcat and other NGOs have been declared foreign agents. And there's actually an upcoming European Court of Human Rights case that will be coming to its conclusion in a week or two that is directly about Bellingcat and other organizations being called undesirable organizations and how that's really encroaching on our freedom of speech.
You've caused enormous damage to the Kremlin's foreign policy and other covert operations, shall we say. And you know better than most people what happens to those who upset the Kremlin. You've investigated the poisonings of Sergei Skripal and Alexei Navalny. Do you feel safe?
I feel probably less safe than I did before I started doing this work, but I certainly don't feel extremely unsafe or anything like that. A lot of it comes down to making sure that, I'm personally careful about my security and, where I go. I'm not, sharing on social media my location minute by minute or anything like that. A lot of the attacks really come from, this kind of cyber attacks. We've been targeted by phishing campaigns, hacking attempts, and that kind of thing. But there's always a risk presented with that, and it's something we take very seriously at Bellingcat, and we take steps to mitigate that as much as possible.
Is it true that your mum's been doorstepped by Russian state media?
Yeah, a few years ago, Russia Today sent someone to my hometown. They actually sent me a message in the morning saying they were coming to film the Diwali festival in Leicester, and would I be interested in doing an interview? And I thought that's really weird because Diwali festival isn't for 3 or 4 weeks. And when I looked into them, they'd just done a piece for Russia Today attacking the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. So I thought, I know where this is going. Then they turned up at my accountant's office asking about where I was, like the secretary at the accountant's office would know. Then my office building, which I was using as basically a PO box, demanding to see me. And then they turned up to my old house where my mother was at the time, and doorstepped her, which I thought was, it really shows how low they'll go with regards to going after people they don't like.